close your eyes for a moment. Can you imagine what silence felt like before there was a word? Before the wind knew how to move, before light had learned to stretch itself thin across the dark. There was only the breath. The breath of the Great Spirit drifted through the endless nothing, soft as a sigh, older than thought, patient as waiting itself. It moved not through space, for there was no space yet, and yet somehow it moved, curling, circling, dreaming. I like to think that before anything was made, the Great Spirit did not rush. There was no hurry to build, no hunger to fill the emptiness. Instead, there was curiosity. What would it feel like? The Spirit wondered if silence could sing, if darkness could shimmer, if stillness could hold the warmth of love. So the Spirit dreamed, and the dream became the first movement. It was not a sound or a flash. It was a breath drawn deep and let out slowly, the kind of breath you take when you want to remember you're alive. From that breath came light, gentle at first, pale as dawn mist. It stretched its arms outward, uncertain but hopeful, and the nothing began to glow. Then, as the Spirit exhaled again, warmth followed, and with warmth came the first pulse. A heartbeat, faint and steady, like the beginning of a song that has not yet found its melody. Some say that this heartbeat still echoes inside us, that every living thing carries that rhythm, the soft drumming reminder that we were born from patience, not chaos. In that light the Spirit wept, not from sorrow but from wonder. The tears floated to the airless dark, gathering together like pearls. And where they touched, the waters began to form, first as mist, then as rivers that knew no banks, seas without shores. They swirled in graceful spirals, guided by a will that was tender rather than forceful. The Spirit watched, and the waters shone back like mirrors, reflecting not what was, but what could be. The Great Spirit's laughter, quiet, like rain falling on the edge of a dream, became the first wind. It ran its invisible fingers through the waters, teaching them to move and play. Together they danced, light in water and air, swirling in joy at their own existence. From their dance rose tiny sparks that scattered outward, and where those sparks landed, the beginnings of earth took shape. Not yet the land we know, but the idea of land, the firmness beneath a thought, the promise that something could be touched. When I tell this part to children, I always pause. I tell them to imagine the color of that first dawn. Not gold, not pink, but something between them. Something too gentle to be captured by names. The Spirit rested then, watching the light shimmer upon the waters, seeing reflections of future mountains, forests, and hearts. The Spirit smiled, and that smile rippled outward until even the silence began to hum. The hum became the language of creation. It was not made of words, because words divide, but of tones, soft and round. The hum carried intention, the Spirit's way of whispering to the forming world. Be kind, be balanced, be alive. And so the light learned to glow without burning, the water to flow without consuming, and the wind to wander without losing its way. Imagine being there, if you can, not as a person, but as awareness itself, a speck of attention floating in the newborn glow. You would feel warmth on one side and coolness on the other, hear the slow rhythm of something immense and loving. No fear, no rush, only the sense that everything around you understood what it meant to wait for beauty. In time, the Spirit shaped the four directions, north for endurance, south for warmth, east for hope, west for memory. The breath moved through each one, setting them gently into motion, like the turning of a great invisible wheel. From that will would one day come the cycle of day and night, the dance of seasons, the pattern of birth and rest and renewal. But for now, all was still forming, tender and incomplete, as if the Spirit wished to savor each unfolding moment. There was no separation between dream and being then. The Spirit thought of color, and color appeared. Deep blues for depth, warm ochres for comfort, soft greens for balance. The Spirit thought of texture, and the waters rippled into waves, their crests glimmering with light. The Spirit thought of companionship, and the first sparks of life began to shimmer beneath the surface. They were not yet creatures, only ideas of them, movements of possibility waiting for names. The Spirit's heart grew full, and in that fullness came tears once more, heavier this time. They fell upon the glowing waters, and wherever they landed, tiny worlds bloomed, worlds within worlds. Some would one day become stars, others the seeds of mountains, others the warmth that lives in all hearts. The Spirit watched and whispered softly, "All things will carry my breath, so none shall ever be alone." And so the breath spread, invisible but endless. It wove itself into every glimmer, every ripple, every pulse. Even the darkness, which had once been empty, began to hum with quiet gratitude. It was as though the universe itself had learned to breathe. When the Spirit looked upon what had been made, there was no pride, only peace. Creation was not a conquest. It was a conversation, a long, slow unfolding between silence and sound, between what was and what wished to be. The Spirit exhaled one last time, long and deep, and in that exhale the world found its rhythm. That rhythm became time, gentle and circular. There were no hours, no endings, just a steady flow of becoming. Light would rise, fade, and return. Waters would move, rest, and rise again. And through it all, the breath would continue, inside everything that moved, everything that waited, everything that dreamed. Sometimes I think the Great Spirit still breathes through us. Every inhale we take is a small remembering of that first creation. Every exhale a quiet offering back to the stillness that came before. Perhaps that's why calm finds us in moments of silence, because somewhere deep inside, we know that silence is not empty at all. It is where we began. So tonight, as you breathe, think of that ancient stillness. Let your breath join the rhythm that never ended. The Spirit's dream is not long ago. It is here, moving through your lungs, humming beneath your heartbeat, whispering through the dark. The world was born from gentleness, and in gentleness, it continues. And if you listen closely beneath the sounds of the night, you may still hear it. The breath before the world, waiting, loving, endless. Perhaps you felt it too, that soft pull in your heart when you watch rainfall. That is where this story begins to live. Long after the breath first stirred the light, the Great Spirit gazed upon the glowing world and felt a gentle longing. The breath had made beauty, yes, but beauty longed for touch, for form, for edges and depths. So the Spirit leaned close and whispered again, and the whisper became the shaping wind. The wind was the Spirit's hand, soft but steady, tracing unseen paths through the glowing air. Where it passed, the mist gathered and thickened, folding over one another like veils asleep. The Spirit moved through them, sculpting the unseen into something that could be felt. From the long, low hum of the wind came the first curve of the horizon, a gentle boundary between breath and being. It was the first horizon, though no one yet existed to stand and marvel at it. The waters had been waiting. They shimmered like liquid light, eager but unsure. The Spirit bent low and touched them, and where that touch fell, ripples spread like laughter across the face of the world. The waters listened. They learned the language of movement, of patience. The Spirit guided them gently. You shall wander, but never be lost. You shall nourish, but never forget to rest. So the rivers were born, winding in silver ribbons, humming softly to themselves. Where the rivers met, the Spirit drew mountains, firm shoulders to cradle them. The peaks rose slowly, as if waking from an old dream. Their stone faces caught the newborn light, and for the first time, the sky found something to lean upon. The mountains did not roar or thunder. They simply existed, still and eternal. They became the bones of the earth, the quiet keepers of memory. The Spirit watched the river slide down their sides and smiled. The sound of water meeting stone was the first song of the world. It was not loud, but it carried weight. Even now, when rain meets rock, you can hear it, the old tune, unchanged. Some say that's why our hearts calm near waterfalls or ocean waves. We remember the first lullaby ever sung. Then came the sky, vast and waiting. Until now, it had been only brightness and breath, but the Spirit wished it to hold stories. So the Spirit lifted the mist higher and higher until they thinned into clouds, soft and uncertain, like thoughts still forming. You shall drift, said the Spirit, and in your drifting, you'll remind all below that nothing truly stays still. The clouds took this promise and began their endless dance. They drifted across the newborn sky, silver turning to gold, gold fading into blue. And when the Spirit wept again, tears of joy, not sorrow, the clouds caught them, and the world tasted rain for the first time. It fell gently, hesitant and pure, like an apology for all the waiting. The rain kissed the rivers, and the rivers shimmered brighter. It kissed the mountains, and tiny threads of green began to stir along their slopes. It kissed the still plains below, and soft moss answered in return. Every droplet carried a message from the Spirit. Grow, but gently, live but kindly. Remember who gave you breath. That was the first covenant between the world and its maker, not a rule, but a rhythm. The sky would give, the earth would hold, and the waters would travel between them, carrying whispers of both. Balance was born not from command, but from care. I often wonder how the first people who told this story felt when they looked at rain. They must have sensed what we sometimes forget, that the world does not merely exist, it responds. When thunder rolls, it is not anger but memory. When rivers swell, they are not raging, they are remembering how to sing. As the sky took shape, colors deepened. The Spirit painted with patience. The soft amber of dawn, the deep violet of dusk, and the pale white of moon that had not yet learned to wax and wane. Stars came later, born from the Spirit's scattered dreams. But even before them, the sky felt full, alive with the promise of watching. The Spirit stood between sky and earth then, feeling the pulse of both. A great peace filled the air, a quiet so complete that it hummed like music. The Spirit breathed, and the wind answered. The waters rippled in rhythm, and the first waves lapped gently against the unseen shores. There was no division, no noise, only belonging. Sometimes I imagine that moment as a long inhale, the world holding its breath before all that was to come, before trees and creatures, before joy and sorrow. The Great Spirit lingered there, content to listen to quiet dialogue between sky and water. There was no need to rush. Perfection was not the goal, balance was, and balance needs rest. So the Spirit created shade, the soft veil between light and dark. It began as a whisper, then grew into evening. The mist thickened once more, settling into valleys and pooling near the rivers. The Spirit smiled, for rest had found its place in creation. Even the world, it seemed, needed a sleep. When morning returned, it came not with fire but with tenderness. The light had softened, gentle by rain. The air smelled sweet, the scent of water meeting warmth, a perfume older than memory. And for the first time, the Great Spirit saw reflection. The sky mirrored in the rivers, clouds mirrored in still pools, light mirrored in the shimmering mist. The world had learned to see itself. And perhaps that is when the Spirit knew that one day, others would come, beings who could look upon this beauty and feel the same awe. The Spirit smiled, knowing that in time, hearts would beat beneath the sky. Feet would walk beside these rivers, and eyes would look upward with the same quiet wonder. Those who came after told this story not as history, but as gratitude. They said the sky is the Spirit's face, ever-changing but eternal. The rivers are its flowing thoughts. The rain, its tears of love. The mountains, its patient hands. And the wind, the wind, they called it the Spirit's breath still moving through us all. So when you stand beneath the open sky, remember, you are standing in the oldest story ever told. When you listen to rain tapping softly against your window, you are hearing the same voice that once sang to the newborn world. Perhaps tonight, when you drift towards sleep, you'll feel that quiet pull, the same one that moved the Spirit to create. Let it calm you. Let it remind you that you, too, were shaped by gentle hands, by patience, by breath. For the world was never shouted into being. It was whispered with love, beneath the sky above the whispering waters. Do you remember the first time someone held your hand and you felt safe? That was the first kind of wisdom. Before language, before tools, before the fire's glow, there was that quiet, instinctive gesture, the meeting of one warmth with another. It was how we learned we were not alone. I remember those first breaths. We were born not from clay or command, but from a joining wind, earth, and warmth braided together by the patience of the Great Spirit. I remember the hum of that harmony before I had words for it. The air was thick with light, as if dawn had chosen to stay forever. Around me, shapes began to stir. We were many, though none of us yet knew numbers. The ground beneath us was soft and new, damp with the dew of creation. When I lifted my hand, the air moved in my fingers and whispered my name, or what would one day be my name, if such things had meaning. My skin glowed faintly, a reflection of the sky above, and I could feel the pulse of the earth beneath me, slow and steady, like a heartbeat too large to belong to one body. We did not yet speak, but we understood one another through rhythm, a glance, a breath, the tilt of a head. When one of us smiled, it was not because of joy as we know it now, but recognition. The spirit's breath had found another home, and in seeing each other, we saw the continuation of that breath. In those early days, the world was vast but not empty. The rivers shimmered, carrying the songs of clouds, and the winds brushed against us as though curious about their own creations. We wandered barefoot through meadows that had no names, touching everything like children who fear forgetting. The grass hummed when we stepped upon it. The stones sang quietly when warmed by our bodies. Every sense was awake. Every moment felt eternal. We learned balance before walking. The earth would sway under our unsteady feet, yet always catch us before we fell. The spirit was patient with us, like a parent guiding a child's trembling steps. When we finally stood upright, we gasped, not from effort, but from wonder. To see so much sky at once was almost unbearable. We raised our arms toward it, not in praise, but in instinct, as though to say, "We are here." Hunger came next, not the gnawing emptiness of later ages, but a simple curiosity, a question in the body. The spirit answered through the earth. Fruit swelled on vines, roots thickened beneath soil, clear water pooled in hollow stones. We tasted slowly, timidly, learning what nourished us and what did not. No creature yet feared another. We shared freely. When one of us found food, all ate. When one found warmth, all gathered close. That closeness was the first language. Before words, before gestures even, there was nearness, a rhythm of breathing together, of hearts sinking in the hush of twilight. We did not yet know time, but we knew the comfort of presence. I remember lying on my side, feeling another's breath against my back, and understanding something wordless. We are safe. The Great Spirit watched, unseen yet everywhere. Sometimes a gust of wind would swirl around us like laughter, or a sudden beam of light would warm our skin when clouds parted. We came to know those moments as affection, the Spirit's way of reminding us we were loved. Even now, when sunlight filters through leaves or a breeze touches your face, perhaps it is the same gentle reminder. In the evenings, though we did not yet call them that, the light dimmed into a soft amber glow. We would sit beside the rivers, watching reflections tremble on the surface, tracing patterns with our fingers. The first reflections we saw were not of ourselves, but of the sky and trees. We had no mirrors, so we imagined our faces by how others looked at us. Perhaps that is still true, that we know ourselves only through the eyes of those who see us kindly. When sound finally found its shape, it came not as speech, but as melody. One day, as the wind passed through hollow reeds, it made a low, trembling tone. We listened breathless, and something inside us stirred. We mimicked it, humming softly, and the air seemed to hum back. Those were the first songs, not planned, not for meaning, but for belonging. And so we learned to make sound not just with our mouths, but with our hearts. When one of us was hurt, a fall, a scrape, others would come near them, and the vibration soothed the pain. When one wandered too far, a low tone would call them home. From this came empathy, not as an idea, but as a pulse that moved between us, invisible yet strong. The Spirit smiled through the rustling leaves. We could feel its pride in the stillness that followed our songs. We began to understand that creation was not finished, that we were part of its continuation. Every kindness, every shared breath was an act of creation itself. I remember the first time I saw another cry. It was a small thing, a tear born from awe, not sorrow. The rain had returned, soft and silver, and she lifted her face to the sky, letting the drops fall into her open mouth. "It tastes like remembering," she murmured, though she did not yet know the words. The rest of us watched, and something in us shifted. We understood that joy and sadness were not opposites, but mirrors, both reflections of being alive. Later, when the winds grew cooler, we learned to build shelter. We wove branches together, not to hide from the sky, but to stay near one another when the nights deepened. The warmth of shared space felt sacred. Our small fires flickered like pieces of sun, gifts borrowed and tended with care. Around them, we told stories, though at first they were only sound and gestures, half song, half memory. But they carried meaning, and meaning carried comfort. We began to name things, not with words as you know them, but with feelings. A river's name was the shape of its flow. The wind's name was the sound it made through leaves. To name something was to love it, to promise to see it again. And so we named everything. The sky, the stones, each other. It was then we began to dream, not just of the spirit, but of tomorrow. Dreams were our first form of hope, the quiet belief that what is beautiful might return. I remember lying beside the fire, watching its glow dance across another's face, and thinking that even in darkness, light would find a way. And when morning came, as it always did, we would rise, take one another's hands, and begin again, walking softly upon the earth, listening to its breath beneath our feet. Sometimes, when I see two people reach for each other now, a child grasping a parent hand, friends leaning close in laughter, strangers helping one another, I remember those first mornings. The Spirit's breath still moves through such moments. It reminds us that from the beginning, the greatest wisdom was never spoken. It was simply shared, hand in hand. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. Tonight, as you rest, think of one thing the earth has given you freely. It could be warmth, a breath of clean air, the quiet touch of water against your skin, or the scent of soil after rain. All of these were among the Great Spirit's first gifts, given not in exchange, but in love. Long before we built walls or measured time, the Spirit gathered us close and offered what would sustain us, not just to survive, but to remember where we came from. The first gift was fire. It did not fall from the sky as punishment or strike as lightning. It came gently, as a whisper light that rose from the heart of the world. The Spirit called it a child of warmth and movement, wild, curious, and bright. When we first saw it, we thought alive, and in a way, it was. The flames danced, small and golden, never still, never cruel, yet powerful enough to command respect. We watched the Spirit lift a handful of this light and place it into our palms. It flickered, testing us, curious about whether we were ready to hold such energy. We learned quickly that it could comfort or destroy, depending on the care we gave it. When we huddled around it, it warmed our skin, dried our damp clothes, and kept the night's chill away. But when we forgot reverence, when we tried to feed it too much or left it untended, it reminded us sharply of its hunger. And so we learned a rhythm with fire. We fed it gently, kept it near, and thanked it every morning when the sun rose, its elder twin in the sky. The Spirit told us that fire was not meant to be mastered, only befriended. It was a companion that taught us discipline, how to watch closely, how to wait, how to see the difference between light and destruction. Even today, when you stare into a flame and feel it almost breathing, that is the same old Spirit, ancient and watching. The second gift came with the rains, seeds. They were tiny, almost invisible, carried by the wind like whispers, resting in our open hands as if asleep. These are children of patience, said the Great Spirit. They teach the slowest kind of wisdom. We did not yet know how to plant them, but curiosity led us to scatter them upon the soil, near the warmth of our fires and the edges of rivers. Days passed, then moons, and one morning, green shoots pushed through the dark earth. Their colors startled us, brighter than water, softer than light. We knelt beside them, afraid to touch, yet unable to look away. The Spirit laughed, a sound like wind through leaves. They are not fragile, it said. They are learning to reach. The seeds became our teachers. We watched how they leaned toward the sun, how they waited for rain, how they returned even after the cold moons passed. We began to understand the rhythm of seasons, the circle of growth, rest, decay, and renewal. It became our first calendar, our first faith. The Spirit showed us how to save the seeds, dry them, and plant them again. Do this, it said, and you will learn that the earth remembers generosity. And we did. We learned to give back. After each harvest, we returned the first handful of grain to the soil as a promise. We will not take without gratitude. Some called it ritual, but to us, it was love, a conversation with the ground that cradled us. The earth was not something beneath us. It was a living being that breathed, waited, and gave. We began to tell the younger ones stories about how every fruit was born from a dream and every stalk of grain carried a memory of rain. Those stories were not to entertain, but to remind. They were the third gift, the one that kept all others alive. Stories came from the Spirit's breath itself. They were invisible but strong, carried in the rhythm of speech, in gesture, in song. We told them by the firelight, voices rising and falling like the flames. In those stories, the world was never silent. The rivers had songs, the mountains had moods, and even the stars whispered old names. To tell a story was to keep the breath of the Spirit moving through us, a kind of endless creation. And as our lives grew more complex, so did the stories. We told of planting and reaping, of journeys and homecomings, of loss and finding. We learned that a story could feed the heart as food fed the body. It gave shape to the unseen, to love, to memory, to faith. Some stories warned us against pride. Others reminded us to share. And every story, no matter how small, carried a spark of the Great Spirit's laughter, urging us not to forget joy. Through fire, we learn care. Through seeds, patience. Through stories, remembrance. Each gift made us more human, though we did not yet know that word. We built small hearts beside the rivers, and soon small gardens grew near them. The scent of earth became the scent of home. When the cold winds came, we gathered seeds inside baskets woven from reeds. When the rains returned, we sang to the soil before planting. Everything had a rhythm, and we learned to move within it rather than against it. Sometimes the Spirit would visit in dreams. In one, it came as a flame wrapped in mist, saying, "Do not forget the difference between ownership and belonging." In another, it appeared as an old tree whispering, "Take what you need and remember to leave the rest." We understood that these were not commands, but reminders. The Spirit never shouted. It only asked us to listen. Over time, the fire became our guardian, the seeds our children, the stories our elders, and through them, we began to sense the passage of generations. The first wrinkles appeared on faces once smooth as river stones. Hair turned the color of ash. Yet the Spirit taught us that age was not decay, but ripening, another cycle, another season. The old ones became living stories, keepers of memory. When night fell, they would draw lines in the dirt, tracing spirals to show the young ones how all things returned. Smoke to sky, rain to river, seed to soil, and breath to spirit. We listened with awe, realizing that every gift was not just for survival, but for understanding. The earth, in giving, was teaching us to give back. Even now, when I kneel to light a candle or plant something small on the ground, I feel that same old gratitude rising in me, the hum of the world remembering itself. The Spirit's gifts were never meant to be distant myths. They live wherever we practice care. So tonight, before you sleep, take one slow breath and ask yourself, what has the earth given you today? A single warm ray of sun, a sip of water, a moment of rest. Each one is part of that first kindness. The fire still dances in our homes. The seeds still sleep and wake. And the stories still whisper through night, reminding us that creation was not a single act long ago. It is happening still, every time we give thanks for what was freely given. Balance, we all search for it, don't we? Between hunger and kindness, between wanting and being. In the early days, when the world was still soft beneath our feet, and the stars were new in their paths, balance was not a rule but a rhythm. We lived inside of the way a bird lives inside the wind, carried, shaped, and taught by it. The Spirit had stepped back by then, not in absence but in trust. It watched quietly, letting us learn to the turning of days. We woke with the sun and slept when darkness folded around us like a blanket. The world was not divided yet into hours or duties. Time moved with the light, and we moved with it. We learned the moods of the sky first. The gentle pink mornings that promised warmth, the gray afternoons that warned of rain, the long violet evenings that whispered of rest. Each color became a teacher. The sun taught diligence, the moon taught patience. And when both shared the sky, even for a breath, we knew balance was near. The animals were our neighbors and, in those days, our tutors. We watched them more than we hunted them. From the deer, we learned stillness. From the birds, the courage to trust the wind. The wolves taught us cooperation, the fish endurance, the bees the beauty of community. Every creature carried a lesson. When we needed to take one for food, we whispered gratitude and promised the spirit we would waste nothing. That promise became the first law of our hearts. Our homes were simple, woven shelters of reed and hide, cool in summer, warm in rain. We lived close together, our laughter drifting like smoke across the meadows. Children chased shadows near the water's edge. The elders sat beneath the trees, telling stories in low, rhythmic tones. We did not yet have gods to fear, only forces to befriend. The wind that cooled, the rain that healed, the earth that held us steady. I remember how the days moved like a song, not rushing, not stalling, but flowing in quiet harmony. We knew when to gather berries and when to leave them for the birds. We knew when to rest the soil and when to plant again. Life was circular then, not a ladder climb, but a wheel to keep turning gently. At night, we learned the sky. The elders pointed to clusters of light and gave them meanings. That one, they said, marks the beginning of the cold moons. That one rises when the fish return. The stars became our guides, patient and unchanging. And beneath them, we began to see patterns, the same ones the spirit had woven into every living thing. But curiosity, that restless ember, had also been placed in us. The spirit had known it could warm or burn, depending on how we tended it. And so, as our understanding grew, so did our desire to test boundaries. One day, a young hunter followed a deer farther than any of us had gone. He returned after many suns, changed. His eyes carried the reflection of mountains none of us had seen. "There is more," he said, "beyond the rivers, beyond the hills." His voice trembled not with fear, but wonder. And in that moment, something stirred inside us, the first taste of wanting more than we had. Curiosity made us inventive. We began to shape the earth, not only to live with it, but to guide it. We dug deeper wells, built traps that caught fish without waiting for luck. We wove tighter nets, sharper tools. The spirit watched, silent and smiling. It did not stop us, though perhaps it sighed, a soft exhale that became the evening breeze. Mistakes followed, as they always do. Sometimes we took more than we needed. Sometimes fires burned too long, or rivers grew cloudy where we washed too eagerly. When animals fled from a valley, we felt the loss like hunger. We gathered then, confused, our hearts heavy. Why did they leave? We asked the sky. The spirit did not answer, but the wind turned cool, and we understood. Balance had been nudged, not broken, and it was ours to mend. So we learned through our own errors. We began to plant again where we had stripped, to move our fires when the ground grew tired. The elders taught that every mistake was a teacher wearing a heavy robe, hard to look at, but wise when listened to. We began to thank even our failures, for they showed us where harmony lived. Domestic life deepened. Women wove baskets fine enough to carry water without losing a drop. Men carved flutes from hollow branches, filling twilight with gentle tones. Children learned to track shadows across the grass, guessing the hour by the shape of light. Every gesture became part of quiet art, the art of belonging. We built no temples, for the world itself was our sanctuary. The river was our prayer, the fire our altar. When someone was ill, we gathered herbs by moonlight, whispering their names. When someone died, we sang them back to the spirit, believing breath must return to breath. Grief was softer then, not absence, but transformation. We knew nothing truly vanished. It only changed its shape. Seasons taught us humility. When the rains lingered, we waited. When they did not come, we shared. The spirit rewarded patience with renewal, and in every returning bloom we saw forgiveness. Even now, I think of those first springs, the way the world seemed to smile again after months of gray. We did not call it hope, but that's what it was. And through it all, we kept listening. To the call of cranes at dusk, the murmur of water over stone, the quiet thrum of the earth beneath our feet. Each sound was a reminder, balance begins in listening. Sometimes I wonder if the spirit placed the moon in the sky to mirror our hearts. It waxes and wanes, bright one night, dim the next, never constant but always true. So are we, pulled between light and dark, learning to move between them without losing our way. The moon taught us the rhythm of tides, of time, of emotion itself. When it disappeared, we did not despair. We knew it was only resting. That was a lesson of balance. That rest is not loss and motion is not gain. They are the same dance, two halves of the same breath. Even now, when the world feels hurried and uncertain, I think back to those early days. We did not have much, but what we had was steady. Warmth, food, laughter, and the quiet understanding that everything we touched was alive. So, when the days feel uneven, when hunger outweighs kindness, when noise drowns out stillness, remember what the first people learned beneath the patient gaze of the Great Spirit. Balance was never something we found once and kept forever. It was something we practiced every day, like breathing. And in that practice, the world stayed whole. If we forget where our breath comes from, can we still call it living? The question drifts across the ages like a feather caught in slow wind. It is not meant to accuse, only to stir something sleeping, a reminder of the first rhythm we once knew, the one that taught us how to listen. There came a time when that listening began to fade. It did not vanish in one day or one generation, but softly, like a candle slowly suffocating in its own smoke. The first people, who had once walked gently and spoken kindly to the rivers, began to forget the quiet language of gratitude. They built walls where once they had planted seeds. They called the earth theirs and spoke of mine and yours, words that had no meaning when all things belonged to the same breath. The Spirit did not speak against them. It had always trusted us to learn, even through error. It watched the smoke rise from our new hearts, brighter, hotter, hungrier. It watched as we built fires not for warmth but for conquest, as we lit forests to clear the way for more. The fire had once been a friend, a playful companion. Now it grew uneasy, knowing it was being used to feed pride instead of gratitude. We began to dig deeper into the soil, pulling from it heart metals and stones we did not need but admire for their shine. The earth, once full of song, grew quiet. Rivers that had once flowed like laughter began to slow, as if unsure of their purpose. Yet still we pressed on, building and taking, thinking the world was endless and forgiving. Then came the years of dryness. The sky turned pale and thin. Clouds passed without offering rain. The wind carried dust instead of fragrance. The ground cracked beneath our feet, thirsty beyond healing. Children looked up at their parents, asking why the rivers had gone. Some said the Spirit was angry. Others said the world was growing old. But no one spoke of gratitude anymore, not in words, not in breath. I remember walking through one of those seasons of silence. The air shimmered with heat, and every step raised a small ghost of dust. The trees, stripped of their green, stood like bones against the horizon. I passed a stream bed that had once sung with frogs and reeds, and now it whispered only in memory. I knelt in the dry mud, tracing the cracks with my fingers, and I realized that the earth still pulsed faintly beneath. It was not gone, only patient, waiting for us to remember how to care. But we did not yet. Instead, we turned on one another. When the wells emptied, we fought over whose hands could claim the last drops. When the fields withered, we built higher fences around what remained. We forgot that hunger shared is lighter than hunger alone. We forgot that the Spirit's gifts were never meant to be hoarded. The Spirit's voice grew softer still. Some said it had left us entirely, but I think it simply withdrew, not out of anger but sorrow. The breath that once moved through everything now lingered only at the edges of our noise. We filled the air with hammer and shout, forgetting how to listen to wind and bird. And yet, even in forgetting, beauty did not vanish. It merely hid. The sun still rose, though we no longer looked up to greet it. Rain still came, though we no longer danced beneath it. The moon still traced her silver path across the night, whispering to anyone awake enough to notice, "You are not alone." I remember one evening, after a long season of drought, a small rain began to fall, just enough to darken the dust, to scent the air with something alive. I saw a young girl step out from her home and lift her face to the sky, her hands open, palms up, as if to catch memory itself. She began to hum, a simple tune, the same one our ancestors sang when the first fire was born. The rain touched her eyelashes, and she laughed. In that moment, I felt the spirit stir again. It struck me then how fragile remembering is. One song, one gesture, one small act of wonder, that's all it takes to awaken what we think we've lost. The spirit had not abandoned us. It was waiting in every breeze, in every seed that still dared to grow. It waited for someone to listen again, but forgetting still ruled most hearts. People began to measure life by what they built, not by what they tended. They grew restless and proud, chasing brightness instead of warmth. They named themselves rulers of the earth and forgot that rulers, too, must serve what sustains them. The balance tilted, and the world tilted with it. Conflicts followed, born not hunger but a desire. Villages quarreled over borders, families over inheritance, siblings over pride. I remember hearing the clash of voices in the night and thinking how far we had come from those days of shared songs beside the fire. The spirit's silence echoed louder than thunder, and yet always there was a thread of grace. Even in ruin, the world did not stop offering beauty. A bird would sing in a field of ash. A flower would bloom between stones. A mother would cradle her child and whisper stories of rivers that once danced freely. The spirit's love had not died. It simply moved more quietly, choosing hearts that still made room for gentleness. There were those who still remembered, though they were few. They gathered under the stars when the nights grew long, telling old stories in hushed voices. So as not to wake the anger of those who mocked them, they spoke of the first people, of the breath and the fire and the seed. They wept softly as they spoke, not from fear, but from longing. In those circles, I felt hope's faint flicker, like the first spark struck from stone. The spirit must have felt it too. Sometimes, in those secret nights, the wind would shift suddenly, carrying the scent of rain from far away. It would weave through firelight, brushing against our hair, our cheeks, our lips, as if to say, I am still here. And so, even in the time of forgetting, the earth did not stop trying to remind us. It forgave more than it should have. It offered new blossoms after fire, new rivers after drought, new mornings after despair. The spirit's patience was endless, though we tested it with every ungrateful act. Now, when I close my eyes, I still see that child with her face turned to the sky, humming a tune older than sorrow. Her song was small, but it was enough. Through her, I remembered what it meant to listen. Maybe forgetting is part of our nature, but so is remembering. Perhaps the spirit designed both, the silence and the song, so that we would learn the weight of our choices, the value of our breath. So I ask you again, if we forget where our breath comes from, can we still call it living? Maybe it's time to listen once more. Step outside tonight. Feel the wind brush your skin. Let it speak in the old language you once knew. It remembers you, even if you've forgotten. Maybe you felt it too, that quiet pull to begin again, to live more softly. It begins not as a shout, but as a whisper beneath the noise of living. For a long time, we had forgotten the sound of that whisper. Yet the spirit had never stopped breathing through the world. It only waited, patient and aching, for us to listen again. It was during a night without moon that the great spirit began to dream once more of return. The stars hung like embers scattered by some vast, unseen fire. At the first time in many generations, the air felt heavy with possibility. People had grown weary of their own noise. The cities they built groaned under their weight, and their hearts longed for something unnamed, a stillness, a gentleness, a belonging they could no longer find in their own creations. The spirit heard that longing, faint but real, and in its compassion, began to weave dreams. Not all at once, but quietly, small, tender awakenings sown like seeds into the minds of those who still carried wonder. I was one of them. The dream came to me as I slept beside the dying embers of fire. At first, I saw only darkness. Then, slowly, a river appeared, but it was no ordinary river. It shimmered with light from within, glowing like a living vein of the earth. The water sang, not with words or with memory, and I understood that it carried the voices of everything we had lost. The current whispered of the first dawns of laughter between trees, of the time when every step was a prayer. I knelt beside it, And when I touched the glowing surface, warmth flooded my hands, not burning, not cold, but the kind of warmth that feels like forgiveness. The river spoke softly. All is not gone. You have only to remember. When I awoke, the feeling lingered like the scent of rain after a long drought. I told no one at first. Dreams in those days were dismissed, just the mind's wandering, they said. But I could not forget, and soon I learned I was not alone. Others began to speak of visions. Quiet, humble people from distant places. A farmer dreamed of trees whose leaves shimmered like stars. A mother saw a deer kneel beside her child and whisper a word she could not recall upon waking, though it left her in tears. A traveler claimed that one morning, the birds sang in unison, not like calls and answers, but as though remembering the same old song. At first, we thought a coincidence. But then the signs began to grow. Rain returned to lands that had long been dry. Rivers that had turned bitter ran clear again. Flowers bloomed out of season, carrying scents no one could name. The spirit was stirring, not in thunder or flame, but in mercy. It was as though creation itself was remembering how to breathe. People began to dream not of wealth or power, but of peace, of simplicity, of laughter echoing through the same fields their ancestors once tended. The Spirit had placed its longing in our hearts, and even those who did not speak of it began to feel the shift, a quiet ache beneath the chest, a sense that something sacred wanted to return. One night, I dreamed again. This time, the Spirit came not as a voice, but as light moving through shadow. It did not speak in words, but I felt its longing, deep and aching, like a parent who misses the sound of their child's laughter. The Spirit showed me a vision of the world as it could be. Mountains unscarred by greed, oceans shimmering with life, children running barefoot through fields without fear. And then, just as clearly, it showed me what was the cities choked by smoke, rivers crying out beneath the weight of waste, people walking past one another without seeing. I woke weeping, not out of guilt, but out of yearning. The Spirit was not angry, it was lonely. It wanted to be known again, not worshipped, not feared, simply remembered. After that, I began to wander, telling others of what I had seen. Not everyone listened, but some did. They were tired too, tired of the noise, the striving, the endless hunger for more. Together, we began to live differently. We shared food again. We walked instead of running. We spoke to the trees as our ancestors once did. And though they did not answer in words, the wind through their leaves felt like conversation. The Spirit sent other messengers too. They came in unexpected forms. A sudden storm that forced strangers to shelter together and share warmth. A wild animal approaching without fear. A newborn who, upon touching the ground, made the air shimmer for an instant as though light itself had bowed in greeting. These moments reminded us that connection was not lost, only quieted. Even the elements began to seem gentler. Fire burned steady without devouring. Rivers flowed strong without flooding. The world had begun to mirror the Spirit's tenderness. It was as if, through our small acts of remembering, creation itself exhaled in relief. But the Spirit knew that remembrance had to grow slowly. True return could not be forced. So it continued to come in dreams, to the tired, to the curious, to the children who still watched clouds and wondered if they were alive. Each dream was different, yet all carried the same message. Live softly. Live softly with the soil that feeds you. Live softly with the creatures that trust you. Live softly with one another. For every word spoken harshly echoes farther than you think. I began to see beauty again. Not the sharp kind that dazzles, but the gentle kind that steadies. The glow of dawn through mist, the hush before rain. The soft hum of bees tracing their paths through the air. It was as though the world had slowed its pulse, waiting for us to match it. Even in the towns, some began to notice. People paused before cutting a tree. They took less, gave more. They taught their children that to step on grass was to tread on a living dream. And in those lessons, something old returned: reverence, gratitude, love without demand. The Great Spirit's dream had not been of punishment or judgment. It was a dream of reunion. The Spirit's own longing finding reflection in our longing for peace. We were not being called to rebuild what was lost, but to awaken what had never truly left. Maybe you felt it too. That quiet pull in your chest when you hear birds at dawn, or when sunlight touches your face and you pause for no reason at all. That's the Spirit's breath, still reaching for you, reminding you that creation is a conversation, not a possession. Tomorrow, when you wake, step outside and breathe. Feel the air move through you as it once moved through the first forests. Let it remind you that even after forgetting, even after harm, the world still dreams of healing, and it dreams through you. Every story needs a voice to remember it. Could it be yours? I ask that not to burden you, but to remind you that remembrance has always begun in a single heart. Once, long after forgetting and long after the Great Spirit began to dream again, there lived a woman who carried that voice. No one knew her name. Perhaps she never had one. But when people spoke of her, they said she moved like the dawn, quiet, steady, inevitable. I was that woman. Or perhaps I am her remembering, echoing through time. My life was not marked by miracles or grand teachings. I did not lead or rule. I simply listened to the wind, to the children, to the silence between things. In that listening, I began to hear a faint melody, something older than language and softer than breath. It came first in dreams, then in the hush before rain, and slowly I began to hum. The tune was simple, but when I sang it, the world seemed to exhale. The air grew lighter, birds paused mid-flight, and people nearby felt something stir in their chests, an ache they could not name. That was the Spirit song, the first song, the one that had shaped the rivers and the light. It had never truly gone silent. It only needed a human heart to remember. I lived on the edge of a small village surrounded by grasslands. My home was little more than woven reeds and clay, open to the wind and warmed by the sun. I woke with the light and slept when the stars took their turns watching. My hands were never still. I wove baskets, mended clothes, planted seeds. Each task was a form of prayer, a rhythm that kept the song alive. When I wove, I hummed softly, and those who passed by sometimes stopped to listen. They said my baskets carried warmth, though I used no fire. They said my seeds sprouted faster, though I used no charm. I told them it was a melody, that the earth remembers sound before words. At first, they laughed kindly, as one humors the strange wisdom of age. But when a drought struck and their fields cracked beneath the sun, they began to visit. They brought me bowls of dry soil and broken grain, asking what could be done. I told them, saying, "Not to me, but to the ground. She has been spoken to in anger for too long. She needs gentleness to remember her purpose." And so we sat together under the fading sky, and I taught them the song. It was not beautiful in the way of trained voices. It trembled uncertain, carried by breath and hope. Yet as we sang, the air grew moist, the scent of earth rose like memory, and within days, the first drops of rain began to fall. They said it was luck. I said it was listening. The song was never mine alone. It belonged to everyone who remembered what it felt like to be grateful. Soon others began to hum it too, mothers while cooking, children while playing, elders while tending the fire. The melody wove itself into daily life. It was not worship, not ceremony. It was simply a way of being gentle again. I began to travel from one home to another, mending what I could, not just clothes or tools, but hearts. I would sit with those burdened by anger or grief, and while they spoke, I wove, threads over threads, patient and steady. See, I would say, how the frayed edges can hold again if we give them time. They thought I was speaking of baskets, but I was speaking of souls. Once, a man came to me, angry at the world. "Your song means nothing," he said. "The rain falls or it doesn't. The Spirit cares nothing for us." I did not argue. I handed him a broken net and said, "Then fix this without caring for it." He tried, but the fibers snapped beneath his hands. He sighed, frustrated. I took it back gently and began to weave again, humming as I worked. "See," I said, "how the thread listens when you do." He sat in silence for a long time. When he left, he carried a new net, and, I think, a quieter heart. People began to call me the weaver, though what I truly wove were moments of connection. I taught them that kindness is not a grand act but a thread, small, continuous, often invisible, yet capable of holding the world together. Seasons passed, and the village began to change. They planted not for profit, but for nourishment. They shared water, without counting who took more. Fires burned again, not as weapons, but as gatherings of warmth. The children learned to listen to the wind. And sometimes, they said, it hummed the same tune I sang. I grew old, though time no longer felt heavy. My hair turned white like river foam, my skin lined like tree bark. Still, my hands kept moving, weaving, shaping, soothing. I would sit outside in the twilight, feeling the spirit in every breath of air. I no longer needed dreams to see it. It was everywhere, in the way light touched water, in the way laughter traveled across the fields. The spirit had never truly left. It had simply needed a song to guide it home. One evening, as the sun folded itself behind the horizon, I felt the presence beside me. It was not in form or shadow, but in stillness, vast, kind, familiar. The Great Spirit spoke not with sound, but through feeling. You remembered. Tears came to my eyes, though not from sorrow. I only sang what was always there. I whispered. That is all I ever asked. The wind stirred, soft as a sigh, carrying the melody far beyond the village. I watched it drift into the distance, knowing it would reach other hearts, other hands, other moments in need of gentleness. That night, I slept deeply. I dreamed the beginning, of rivers glowing in the dark, of mountains breathing, of stars born from laughter. The spirit was there, vast and loving, its voice like the hum beneath all things. Tell them, it said, tell them that remembering is enough. When I awoke, dawn had painted the world gold. The people gathered outside my home, singing the song. Their voices blended, old, young, strong, frail, all woven together like threads in one vast tapestry. I smiled and joined them, my voice trembling but true. For the first time in many generations, the world felt whole again. Now, whenever I hear wind moving through trees, I still feel that song alive. It belongs to you too, if you choose to hum it. The melody of care, of patience, of return. You don't need to know the words, just the feeling. Every story needs a voice to remember it. Could it be yours? Perhaps tonight, as you close your eyes, you will hear it too. The quiet hum of creation still weaving itself through your breath, waiting, always waiting, to be sung again. Perhaps peace isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we return to slowly, like a river that bends and meanders, but always finds its way back to the sea. So too do our hearts. After the long silence, after the years of forgetting, people began to listen again. Not all at once, not in a great awakening, but through small, almost invisible moments of kindness. It was as though the Great Spirit's breath had begun to move gently through the world again, stirring what had lain still for so long. The first signs were simple. A man knelt to clear a block stream where fish had vanished generations before. He did not expect reward, only the sound of water flowing freely once more. A woman shared her last loaf of bread with a stranger and discovered that hunger feels lighter when divided. Children began to hum the old tune without knowing its name, their voices blending softly with the rustle of grass. These were small things, too small to be called miracles, but together they were the heartbeat of renewal. The rivers, long patient, began to sing again. The water turned clear enough to catch the reflection of clouds. Trees leaned closer to one another, their leaves whispering stories of return. Animals, once shy and scattered, appeared at the edges of fields, watching without fear. People spoke to them again, not in words, but in tone, in presence, in stillness. The spirit was near, though no one claimed to see it. It was enough to feel it, in the pulse of rain, in the shared breath between living things. Villages began to hold small gatherings, not grand ceremonies, but evenings by the fire, where songs and stories flowed as freely as the rivers. The elders taught the young the melodies that once shaped creation. They spoke of the breath and the balance, of gratitude as the first form of wisdom. No one declared a new beginning. It was quieter than that, more human. Renewal never arrives with trumpets. It arrives in how gently we choose to speak again. I remember one night in particular. The sky was a deep blue bowl filled with stars, and the people sat around a single flame. The air was warm and still, the kind of stillness that holds its own music. An elder lifted her voice, old and trembling, but filled with life. She sang the first song of the world, the one the woman who remembered had taught. And as her voice carried through the air, others joined, one by one. It was not perfect, not practiced, but it was true. For the first time in many lifetimes, I felt the Great Spirit smile through the wind. Gratitude became a rhythm again. Each morning, people greeted the rising sun, not with demands, but with thanks. Farmers touched the soil before planting, whispering, "We remember." Fishermen poured a few drops of water back into the river before casting their nets. Children learned to thank the fire before warming their hands. These were not rules, but relationships. Gratitude, they discovered, was not an act of worship, but a belonging. Slowly, the world responded. The rains fell in rhythm again, not too much, not too little. Seeds grew with vigor. Birds nested in places they had abandoned. It was as though the earth itself breathed easier. Some said it was the Spirit's doing. Others said it was the people's. But perhaps it was both, the world and its children remembering how to move together once more. I wandered often in those days, walking the same paths I had once known in silence. Now they thrummed with life. I would see families working side by side, pausing often to rest, laugh, and share stories. Even the old who could no longer walk far sat beneath trees, weaving baskets or simply watching the play of light on leaves. "We've learned to take turns," one of them told me, "with the land, with the sky, with each other." There were still moments of forgetting, of course. Old habits linger like shadows. Sometimes people quarreled, or greed crept quietly back into the heart. But unlike before, they recognized it. Instead of letting anger harden into walls, they spoke, they listened, they sang. One night, I saw two men who had fought over water sit by the same river and pour what they had saved back into it. They watched the ripples carry their reflection downstream, and I could see the relief in their faces. Not victory, but release. Dreams, too, began to change. People spoke of seeing animals approach them in sleep, a bear offering protection, a bird guiding them home, a river whispering secrets. The dreams were not commands, only reminders. They carried the same message. Always, remember the balance. Live gently, love steadily. Give back what you take. Some said the dreams were the Spirit's language returning to us. And perhaps they were, but they also came from within, from that deep part of every soul that knows harmony by instinct. Children grew up surrounded by this new quietness, a peaceful kind, not empty but full of listening. They learned the cycles of the moon, the signs of rain, the songs of birds. They learned that the plant was to promise, and that the harvest was to honor. Their laughter carried across fields and forests, and with it, the world itself seemed to laugh. Sometimes, in the evenings, we would gather by the river to watch the fireflies rise. Their soft light drifted above the water like tiny stars falling to earth. Someone would start a hum, an old tune, the same one the woman had once sung, and the hum would spread until even the insects seemed to move in rhythm. There were no words for what we felt, only a shared knowing. This is what it means to be alive and to belong. I have walked through centuries of both silence and song, and I have learned that the world does not ask for perfection, only participation. The Spirit does not demand prayer, only presence. Harmony is not a state to achieve. It is a way to walk. It is found in how we touch the earth, how we speak to one another, how we breathe with awareness that breath itself is sacred. So perhaps peace was never lost. It waited, like the sun behind clouds, patient for our remembering. And when we finally turned toward it again, we saw that it had never truly left. It had been in the rhythm of our footsteps, in the curve of a river, in the hush that follows kindness. Now, when I stand by the water's edge and listen, I can hear both the past and the present singing together, the first song and the new one intertwined. The Spirit's breath moves through it all, quiet and infinite. It reminds me that the world's healing does not come through sudden change, but through 1,000 small acts of care, repeated faithfully, day after day. Perhaps peace isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we return to slowly. So, take a deep breath now. Feel the air enter your chest, a gift older than memory. Let it leave you gently, like a tide that trusts it will return. That is all the world ever asks of us, to keep breathing to keep balancing, to keep remembering that we were never separate from the harmony we seek. Night has always been the truest mirror. When the world grows quiet and the last firelight trembles low, we begin to see what was hidden in daylight, not just the stars above, but the light that flickers softly inside us. It has always been this way. Long before our words, long before our hands built walls or lit fires, the night was our oldest companion. And tonight, as the flames shrink to embers, I feel that same quiet breath upon my skin, the Great Spirit's presence, gentle as ever, watching, waiting, remembering. The circle closes again, not as an ending, but as a return. Everything that was the breath, the rivers, the forgetting, the song, all of it is led here, beneath this same vast sky. Listen for a moment. Can you hear it? The hum beneath the cricket's song, the pulse that moves through the grass, the low murmur of the earth itself? That is the spirit, not gone, not distant, but present in every trembling thing. We once called it creation. Now I think of it as breathing. The universe exhales and we are born. It inhales and we remember. The fire crackles softly. Each spark rises, dances for an instant, then disappears. And yet, its warmth remains. The people around me have grown quiet, resting against one another, eyelids heavy. Some still hum the old melody, faintly, their voices blending with the wind. It is not a song of worship now, but a belonging. We no longer ask for forgiveness. We simply offer thanks. I look up. The stars shimmer like ancient eyes, patient, knowing, endless. I wonder if they remember the first dawn, the first laughter, the first hand that reached for another. Perhaps they do. Perhaps each star is a memory kept by the Great Spirit, a light it refused to let fade. Even the ones we cannot see still shine somewhere far away. There is peace in that thought, that nothing truly vanishes. It only moves beyond our sight. The Spirit has taught us this again and again. Everything circles back in its own time. The river evaporates, becomes cloud, and returns as rain. The seed falls, rests, and rises. The breath leaves, softens into silence, and returns in the next newborn cry. Creation is not a line. It is a heartbeat, repeating endlessly. When I was young, I used to think the Spirit lived above, somewhere beyond the stars. I would pray upward, imagining my voice carried on the wind, hoping it reached that great unseen listener. But now, after all the years and all the stories, I know better. The Spirit was never far. It has always been beneath our feet, in our lungs, in the spaces between our thoughts. It is not something to reach for. It is something to remember. Sometimes remembering is easier at night. The darkness has a way of softening us, of drawing out the truth we hide in daylight. Perhaps that's why our ancestors told stories by firelight, not to pass time, but to pass memory. Each story was a thread, and together they wove the fabric of meaning. Even now, as I speak, I can feel those threads connecting, from my voice to your breath, from your heartbeat to the quiet sky above. The Spirit's patience is infinite. Through all our mistakes, the taking, the building, the forgetting, it never turned away. It simply waited for us to listen again. It knew that eventually we would grow tired of our own noise. And when we did, it was there unchanged, ready to begin the song once more. That is what the stars remind me of, the faith of waiting. They burn for millions of years, expecting nothing, offering everything. They do not demand to be seen, yet their light travels across the darkness just the same. The Great Spirit, too, shines through our forgetting, steady and forgiving. Its language is time, its grammar is love. When I speak of the Spirit, I no longer imagine a distant being. I think instead of moments, of a mother's hand brushing a child's hair, of a friend sharing water, of the hush before dawn when the world holds its breath. The Spirit lives in those pauses. It watches, not from above, but through us. Earlier tonight, as twilight deepened, a child asked me, "Does the Great Spirit sleep?" I smiled and shook my head. "No," I said, "but it dreams through us." The child frowned, thoughtful. Then what do we dream through? I looked at the horizon where the first stars were rising. Through each other, I answered. Through kindness, through memory, through breath. The child nodded, satisfied, and curled beside the fire. I watched them fall asleep and thought of how the Spirit, 2. Must rest sometimes, not in slumber, but in trust. It trusts us to keep the story alive, to sing the song when it forgets its own words, to be gentle when the world grows loud. That is the partnership we were made for, not to rule creation, but to accompany it. The flames fade lower now. Only a few glowing coals remain, pulsing like quiet hearts in the ash. The wind moves softly through the camp, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, deep, steady, like a drumbeat marking time. The night feels vast, yet intimate. It is the kind of silence that holds you rather than swallows you. I close my eyes and breathe. The air tastes of warmth and earth. I think of all who came before, the first beings, the ones who learned to walk and share, the woman who remembered the song, the children who hummed it anew. Their breaths are in mine. Their kindness lives in these same stars. I realize in that every story is not an ending, but a continuation, a ripple in the same great river. The Spirit has been telling this story since before language, through waves against shore, through the cry of birds, through the steady heartbeat of every creature that has ever lived. When we tell stories now, we are not inventing, we are translating. We are giving voice to what the universe has always been saying. You belong here. You always have. People sometimes ask what the Spirit looks like. I tell them it looks like everything that forgives, like water washing over a wound, like a tree bending under snow but not breaking, like eyes that soften when they see kindness. The Spirit is not a face to behold, but a feeling to return to, a knowing that even after darkness, dawn will come, and dawn always comes. Already, the stars begin to fade slightly, their light paling against the promise of morning. The night does not end. It simply hands the world back to the sun. The Spirit's watch continues, unseen but eternal, its breath moving through both light and shadow. Sometimes, I think that's what peace truly is, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. To know that even when we falter, we are still part of something vast and loving. To know that we can begin again as many times as it takes. The world is full again now, full of song, of gratitude, of balance rediscovered. Yet we will forget again someday. That is the nature of living things. But forgetting does not frighten me anymore. I know now that memory always returns. The Spirit's patience is longer than time. It does not measure in years, but in heartbeats. As long as one person listens, the song will continue. So, before you close your eyes tonight, listen once more, not to my voice, but to the quiet around you. Feel the steady rhythm beneath your chest. That is the same pulse that once moved through the rivers, through the mountains, through the stars themselves. You are part of it, not above, not below, but within. Breathe deeply. Inhale the story, exhale the noise. You are home again, in the circle that never ended. The Spirit is here, in the cool air, in the weight of your body against the earth, in the small flicker of warmth behind your ribs. It watches not to judge, but to remember with you. It is both the storyteller and the listener, both the beginning and the breath between endings. When the last ember fades and only starlight remains, do not fear the dark. It is not emptiness. It is the Spirit's open hand. Lay your heart there. Let it rest. Let it remember. And if this story has brought you even a moment of peace, let it travel. Share it, so someone else may find rest beneath the same sky. For that, too, is how the Spirit moves. From breath to breath, from story to story, from heart to heart. Good night, traveler. The fire is low now. The stars are bright, and the Spirit still watches. Sleep knowing that you are seen, you are part of the circle, and you are loved, endlessly, gently, completely. And when morning comes, carry the quiet with you. Speak softly. Walk kindly. Remember that every step, every word, every small act of care is another verse in the Spirit's song, one that began before the world, and one that will never end. So breathe one last time with me, in and out. The world breathes with you. The night exhales. The Spirit smiles. And all is well beneath the stars.